Afternoon. We will start our Transit and Transportation Committee meeting. We have 2 items on the agenda today. We have the first item that we will cover will be a rezoning Z9422 Creedmoor Road, and then we will cover the Six Forks Road Improvement Project. These 2 cases have not had their public hearings yet, so we will be hearing, listening, and we will probably refer these out. We cannot make any recommendations because we've not had the public hearing, but at least we'll have a good conversation. But before we do that, our Assistant City Manager, Michael Moore, you have an announcement?
Yes, sir. Thanks for a few minutes here. I just want to let the public know that the Transportation Department is having an event tomorrow afternoon and evening at Chavis Park. It's our Transportation and Treats event. It's an opportunity for the public to come out and to see some of the good things that the Transportation Department does, get to see some of the work they do with the little robot that looks through storm sewer pipe and things like that. So lots of great things like that. And there may be a little trick or treat goes on out there as well. So I want to make sure everyone is aware of that, and we invite everyone to come join us there. So,
And what's the time again?
so it's from 3 to 7 o'clock.
3 to 7. Cool.
Right. Thank you
so
so much.
please definitely come out. Thank you for that announcement. Well, we will start our first we will have, and just so everyone understands, staff is going to give a presentation. Then I'll give council a chance to ask any questions, and then I will see who's here to speak on the topic, and then I'll determine time from that standpoint, and we'll go from there. But the first one will be the rezoning Z9422.
Good afternoon, Hannah Recca with Planning and Development. So this is rezoning Z9422, 2 properties on Creedmoor Road, a little under 5 acres. The request is to rezone from R4, with a little bit of the site being RX4 CU, to a planned development district. The request is inconsistent with the future land use map, consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the Planning Commission recommended approval. So locating the site on Creedmoor Road, the west side, north of Crabtree Mall, and south of the intersection with West Millbrook Road. There being commercial uses in those 2 spots and quite a bit of residential on either side of Creedmoor Road. You can see this site. There's a house currently on the site near the frontage with Creedmoor Road, otherwise relatively undeveloped. To the north, that's Magnolia Glen, senior assisted living community. To the south, on Manassas Pope Road, is a townhome community. And then to the west is York Elementary School. And you can see what that looks like from Creedmoor Road, some views of the site, looking north and south. So planned development districts are unique in that they let the applicant select certain requirements in the UDO that they would like to amend and have some relief for, and that's typically in exchange for more certainty on quality of development on the site. So I'm going to go through the requested modifications to code now that's in this application. One pertains to driveway and intersection spacing. So there's a minimum in the Raleigh Street Design Manual, and they are requesting to reduce that to 125 feet, and that would be specifically 125 feet from Manassas Pope Lane. They're also seeking to reduce the requirements around a height transition in the neighborhood transition. So as you may recall, there are several zones of a neighborhood transition where a mixed-use district is next to a residential district, which, as is the case, particularly to the south. One of those zones would require a step down, no taller than 40 feet at the beginning of that zone and increasing at a 45-degree angle. And the request here is to allow 65 feet in height throughout that whole area. And then 2 other modifications that pertain to streetscapes. And I'll actually go back to this map. The Manassas Pope right-of-way here extends up, and the site has touches that boundary. And so the other 2 requested modifications are essentially clarifying that there would be no streetscape required to be established along that right-of-way. Some other requirements that are in the PD, non-residential principal uses are prohibited. They're also committing to a public pedestrian path along parallel to the southern boundary, parallel to Manassas-Pope, that would connect into that right-of-way, Brookhaven right-of-way. And then 3 requirements that come from the transportation impact analysis, and were mitigations identified in that analysis. So specifying ingress and egress lanes as right in, right out to Creedmoor Road, extending a southbound right turn lane with a certain amount of storage, and then placing a stop sign at the vehicular exit on Creedmoor Road. So this is one of the plan maps from the requested district. There's a lot going on here, so I'll just point out the building envelope is here in yellow. The green is identified amenity areas, proposed parking structure there in the center, and then vehicular access at this pink arrow, and then the dotted line is the location of the Brookhaven, or the pedestrian path, and you can see it would go along the property and then turn south to connect into an existing sidewalk that connects the elementary school and Manassas-Pope Lane. So as kind of a final summary of the requested district, it's a OX5 PL base, so maximum of height of 5 stories. They've are really permitting only residential principal uses, seeking relief from mainly driveway spacing standards and the building height transition requirements. And then the PD would also include that public pedestrian path, as well as the mitigation measures identified in the TIA. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the request.
Thank you so much for the presentation. After speaking with residents, there are a few questions that I have. First, we'll go with the pedestrian path. Why does that go into the townhouse community and to Brookhaven? Was that a request by the developer, or is that just part of the street plan to do that from the city?
I don't believe it's part of the street plan. It was something that the applicant offered to make it a public path to connect to somewhere, right?
Okay, my hesitations, and as I've heard from the townhouse community, is bringing people through the back way, especially onto an elementary school, is maybe a little bit concerning for neighbors, especially after having some, the greenway issues that we've had in the past. Why we would want to connect that to a school is a little bit concerning. So I'd want to know if you have the nature pocket at the back of the property, the northwest side of the property, why that path wouldn't connect back over there so it would remain on their own property.
Sure, yeah, so that's the one area I did not point out, which is this corner here is the identified tree conservation area. And so as a TCA area, a path could not go through.
I see, so that was just not allowed in the beginning. Okay, cool,
correct.
so thank you so much for that clarification. Further concerns that I've heard from the neighbors are just traffic concerns in this area. Across the street, there's already been approved another 300-unit project that has not been built yet. We just approved a smaller one, which is not very large. I think it's an office park that's right across the street from here. But this area of town, it's right next to the mall, north of the mall, as you stated. There is a ton of traffic in this area. My friends over in Magnolia Glen, right north of this space, they have issues, especially since there's no turn lane or a stoplight out there, of getting across. They're not supposed to make a left out of that, but that doesn't always happen, and not that that causes the concern, but just the onset of traffic and as many people. So I'd be really interested from traffic to hear what the plans are from the state, since this is a state road. This is it has always been a state road, and we don't have any jurisdiction over, what happens there, if we put a stoplight there or not. So I'd really love to hear from transportation as to what the plans are from the state level for the improvements on this area.
Good afternoon, members of the council. I am Monique Guyant with Transportation. Throughout this process of working with this case, C-9422, we've been coordinating with DOT to sort of provide them the background of the signal warrant analyses that have been taken place at the northern intersection, specifically Magnolia Glen and Creedmoor Road. And through sharing the results of that study, they did not view the traffic signal to be properly warranted, and that they do not recommend signalization of this intersection.
And I heard that, and that begs or helps me with another question that comes up. What are the warrants, and how close are they to those warrants?
Okay, for the specifics of that, I'm going to turn it over to Jed Neffenegger.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is exciting because this is my wheelhouse. Council has adopted the METCD, and NCDOT strictly adheres to it. And we as a service to residents will conduct signal warrant analysis. In a case like this where it's a state highway system road, we would just pass those warrants on, our analysis on to DOT. They can agree, disagree. It's their road, so they ultimately make the decision. Generally, because we follow the same rules laid out in the METCD, the guidelines, they generally agree. So when we looked at this, we took the trips from the TIA from both developments and added it. I believe because it's a right out, if you want to head southbound from the development on the east, there would be U-turns occurring at the Sherborne intersection. So we added that, and then we added the southbound trips as well. And the only warrant that it met, well, there's 9 warrants. There's warrants such as railroad crossing. Obviously, look at crash history. There wasn't a crash pattern out there that would cause the state or us. It didn't meet the warrants, the requirements for a crash history pattern out there. School would be another warrant. Very heavy pedestrian activity. Very heavy. Thank goodness we have another tool like a Hawk, which is a lot less. But then there's 3 main ones that look at volume. There would be the peak hour, which just looks at the traffic during the peak hour. And the interesting thing with Magnolia Glen is the main street had the volume for the peak hour, but the side streets did not, which means a lot of the trips were occurring off-peak. And it met warrant 2, which is a 4-hour warrant, which meant Creedmoor's obviously going to have enough traffic to meet the 8-hour, the 4-hour, and the peak. It meant the traffic on the side street for 4 hours over a 24-hour period were enough to meet that warrant. NCDOT generally on a thoroughfare like Creedmoor, most any side streets of any reasonable size are going to meet peak hour in probably a 4-hour. DOT would like to see the 8-hour met before they would consider signalization and or have a crash pattern, which doesn't sound the greatest, but they have limited funding. If it meets an 8-hour, oftentimes with the development, they will allow one to go in with the development, so a crash pattern won't occur. But we're talking about a signal that's not right at the development. It's upstream from the development. I don't know if that helps.
I'm going to digest it for a second because there's a lot of words that I'm going to let sit there for a second. My Sherborne is across the street, right? This Sherborne isn't here.
Correct. Sherborne's north of both of these developments.
Right, on the other side. Okay. I guess when as I hear resident concerns, as I do go to these neighborhood meetings, it's a concern of there's not a full understanding, and what I'm hearing from you is that there's many different warrants that we're talking about when we say a traffic study wasn't warranted. And I think the clarification of understanding how close we were, because I kind of want to see, were we this close to meeting that warrant? Were we this close? And how that's been a question that's come up, and I don't know how to answer that. So your clarification that there are many different ones will help me do that. But just to clarify, you're saying that some of them were met, but overall, they decided that the warrants weren't fully met in all of the categories to warrant a traffic a TIA, or
Wouldn't warrant installation of a traffic signal.
installation of the traffic signal.
Correct.
Okay, so that you're talking directly about that traffic signal.
Correct.
Okay, and I think their concerns move beyond that as we discuss it. It's that there's one with the traffic signal, which I appreciate your thoughts on, but as we look at the body and the volume that's coming in this area, and being really careful how much we're adding to that, not just because of the traffic light, but just there's the school right next to them. There's Magnolia Glen, and as we continue to add volumes of traffic, I don't want to wait. I think their concern is that we don't want to wait for another accident, or not another, because we've not seen many, but I don't want to wait to watch someone to die before we say, okay, we need to do something. And I think that's the biggest concern that I've been hearing from the public, that I don't know that in our neighborhood meetings has been best conveyed, because I don't know how to make that any clearer for them, or who they can contact. Because my response has been, that's a state road, and it's not something that we have control over. But then I'm not sure not that I'm not sure, it is not sufficient to tell my neighbors, my constituents, so not my problem, that we're in Raleigh, they live in the city, and I just want to make sure to point them in the right direction, to make sure that if we're not enough, if my voice saying, oh, we want a traffic light, or we want any improvements on the road, if that's not enough, I need to give them the opportunity to know who else to go to, so that they can make their voice heard there. So that's what I've been battling with in the lead up to this case coming before us, and I appreciate you helping me funnel those concerns to the right departments.
If it's any consolation, the DOT that I used to deal with when I first came to the city is changed significantly. They're a lot more open to urban architecture that programs like Vision Zero and several others would support. I realize there's a mile section between, I think it's Plaza and Glenwood, and Vision Zero and my staff, we would like to see a signal at some point come along in there to provide that pedestrian connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
In talking to DOT this morning, we had a separate meeting, we brought this up. There's so much development going on. I suspect at some point in the very near future, a signal will go in that will meet warrants, that will provide that connection. I just don't think DOT felt comfortable with these two, that it would trigger it signalization north of the developments at Sherborne.
And is that because right north of this area, there's the lights at, I forget the names of it, but right where Relish is, and where Harris Teeter and all of that,
Millbrook.
is it too?
Yeah, Millbrook.
No, there's
that
a light
Plaza?
before.
There's Plaza,
That's,
and then
that's
Millbrook.
Plaza,
Yeah.
right. So
Plaza.
because is that what you're saying, that it's too close between those? There's not enough space between those two lights?
It was more so to do with, generally, when a development comes in, they want a signal right at their front door. Because there's a median there, the benefit, they're not adding that much traffic to Sherborne, and it wouldn't be, the development wasn't necessarily causing a significant impact to that intersection up there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I don't know if that sits well with residents, because we're seeing an additional amount of people come through. I would be interested to hear what you alluded to it now, that at some point we would want that. The DOT has said that they might want a signal. I'd love to hear or know where to go to see where those plans are. I think Assistant City Manager Moore had met with me about Glenwood, and we did this overall from 5 points all the way up my district, and talked about all the projects that DOT has in place. So I'd love to know where I can find that for Creedmoor.
So, Councilmember, I doubt that exists for Creedmoor. So I doubt that there is a plan that talks about that. I believe what our city traffic engineer was trying to step through a little bit is, as development comes, as volumes increase, as those needs to get back and forth across the street to meet those warrants for pedestrians, there'll be at some point in time a tipping point that DOT would look at and say, yes, some of these, a signal would be warranted at some location. So I think it's a little difficult for us to forecast what that tipping point might be, but I believe that's what you're alluding to. And
Right.
so I don't believe that there's a plan in place for this portion of Creedmoor.
And I don't mean for this portion of Creedmoor. What I was saying was kind of what we did with Glenwood, which was just the overall plan for improvements, whether or not it's this traffic light, over the entirety of Creedmoor and Edwards Mill, since they turn into each other, that overall plan.
Yes, correct. I think the difference there is there are a series of projects and a series of plans for Glenwood. So what we were able to share is how those things are all linked, and
Right.
those are part of the bigger metropolitan transportation plan and the city transportation plan and the street plan. So there is a series of projects that, and there are projects that are developed for that. But Creedmoor, there's probably likely some elements of street plan that we can share, but not project specific that would
Got it.
create those kinds of improvements that you're looking at the moment.
Got it. And I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to say that uplift my residents, that we don't want to wait for an accident. We don't want to wait for something horrible to happen before we push for, more improvements in that area. But with that, I will stop talking. Thank you.
All right, thank you. How many people are here? Thank you for Jed for the information. And trust me, I know how difficult it is to get a stoplight because I have an intersection that actually does have accidents that the poles are up, but the lights are not. So that's a whole nother conversation, another day. How many residents are here to speak on this case? Just 3? Okay, so what I'll do is we'll just do 3 minutes each to come up. Just give your name, and we'll again, we're listening, taking notes, and then we'll go from there. So whatever order you all would like to come up.
It's important. Hello, thank you for your time. I'm Mary Casey. I'm the executive director for Magnolia Glen. And just to kind of speak to the traffic concerns that we have, we know that the development is inevitable and that's going to happen. And we have a new development across the street on Creedmoor Road that hasn't yet been built. I think our biggest concern, and yes, while we would love to have a light at our intersection coming out of Magnolia Glen at Sherborne Place, as it was alluded to earlier, we're not supposed to take a left-hand turn out of our community and go north on Creedmoor Road. And so what happens is a lot of our residents, our visitors, our guests, EMS personnel, first responders, they all have to turn right and go down Creedmoor Road and then make a U-turn at Sugarbush. And that Sugarbush U-turn, to me, is more dangerous than turning left out of our community at Sherborne Place. You get, at busy times, peak times of the day, you will travel down there at 5 o'clock, even 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there'll be 4, 5, 9 cars lined up in the turn lane to turn left, either on Sugarbush or to U-turn and turn north up Creedmoor Road. And so we've seen accidents. I think in the last 2 months or so, we know of at least 3 accidents. We've had some that happened this past spring. So I know accidents are occurring from our entrance all the way down to Glenwood Avenue. And so our biggest concern is not only what's happening right at our intersection, but it's the traffic itself on Creedmoor Road. And so for us to have to go down and make a U-turn at Sugarbush, for our residents and guests to head north on Creedmoor Road, with the new development coming in next door, they don't have a median cut directly across right now from their development. So every resident that's going to reside there will be forced or have to take a right-hand turn out of their community and go down to Sugarbush and make a U-turn if they want to head north on Creedmoor Road. And so all of those factors combined are what is concerning to us, and just with the number and the volume of traffic. Speeding is a big problem. That section of Creedmoor Road has a lot of hills. I had a visitor from our home office in California with me today, and he said, I am terrified turning left into your community every morning because people are flying down and I can't see them. So this is what our residents, we have senior citizens that reside in our community that are still active. We have several residents that still work. They're very engaged in the community. They're very involved. And so we do have residents and their families frequently coming in and out of our community every single day. So when we're talking about transportation as a whole, yes, ideally we would love to have a traffic signal light or a trip light at our entrance and our intersection at Sherborne Place. But we feel that having some type of light somewhere on that strip of Creedmoor Road will help stop the flow of traffic and the speeding so that people that are having to get out onto Creedmoor Road and enter the highway will be able to do so more safely. So those are our biggest concerns, and we just ask that as we look forward to more development, we have the infrastructure in place to be able to support it safely for our residents. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak?
I'm Joan Barron, a resident of Magnolia Glen. I do still drive safely. I agree with everything Mary said. 2 points. We are working as a collaborative in our community. We have our neighbors on the other side of the proposed rezoning, and we are working together because our issues are their issues. And we are also working with our neighbor to the north, Temple Beth Or. But I think this is a bigger Raleigh issue. Creedmoor Road, I'm just big on this. Creedmoor Road is one of the biggest north-south connectors. Anywhere you want to go between 540 and Crabtree Valley, which is a big destination. Anywhere you want to go between 540 and all the medical that's built up at Rex Hospital and around it. Anywhere you want to go from 540 on down to the new PNC, which is primed for further development. Therefore, it's not only going to affect us to get in and out, which is very dangerous, but it's also going to affect what happens to people from the part of Raleigh that exists now. We've been told there's over 31,000 cars a day on Creedmoor Road in our area. We're growing. That's the name of the game. So there's going to be more. There's just no way to get to these important parts of Raleigh. So I think it is a bigger issue than we getting into and out of our area safely. It is very important to us, certainly, but I do think it's something that is beyond this particular rezoning and really does affect all of Raleigh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sam Pasquarelli, and as the last speaker said, my wife and I live in the Copper Ridge development on Manassas Pope Lane. I hope that this development is not fated to happen. I guess the first thing I don't understand is the city adopted a master plan and decided that this land ought to be zoned R4. It's usable for R4 purposes. Putting 300 plus units in there is really going to create a major problem, I would think. If you look at the map up there, the proposed driveway coming onto Creedmoor is probably, I'll say, 100 feet from the Manassas Pope Creedmoor intersection and maybe 200 or so feet from the entryway to, pardon me, Magnolia Glen. The number of residents that are going to be in that new area are as many as are already in the Copper Ridge development where I live, in the Magnolia development where these ladies live. So you're going to have as many cars on a 5-acre plan as you have on the 2 ones on each side of it. And I don't know what the size of the development across the street is, but my understanding is another 300 and some units. So you have tripled or quadrupled the number of vehicles that are going to come out onto Creedmoor in a, quarter mile? I don't think there's any solution to this other than that development it's going to be a crisis. I agree with what the traffic engineer said. I don't think a stoplight's going to do anything because it's going to back traffic up as opposed to allowing it to flow. There's already too much traffic there. You can't get across Creedmoor by to make a left to go north because there's a barrier in the middle of the road. So and I came out of there last night, and when I got down to the Sugar Bush left turn lane, the left turn lane was filled. and there were 6 or 7 cars backed up onto Creedmoor. That is a dangerous situation because just like Councilman Jones said, the cars come down Creedmoor, they don't expect to have to stop in the middle of the street. They don't think they have to stop until they get to the left turn at Glenwood, and it's not happening. This development is going to put so much stress on the infrastructure. And I think, and this is a transportation meeting, so I don't know if you're the people that can do anything about it. You don't have the infrastructure to take another 300 people on that street. The new infrastructure you need is a wider street, and you can't put a wider street in there. I would just really say to you all as transportation people, and I'll be here at the regular meeting, the zoning up meeting if we get to that point, is that this development is just fated to be a crisis traffic-wise. When you look at the number of cars that are planned to go out on that street compared to the number of cars that already go onto it, you're talking about a geometric increase that you can't deal with. How do you prevent 300 cars from doing what 300 cars already do now? So I hope you take that into consideration. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. You have a question? All right, real quick, couple things. First, I think the applicant's here. I can give you 3 minutes if you want to come down and say anything.
Hello, everyone. Marcos Vidal.
We'll give him 3 minutes as well.
Vista Residential Partners, 4000 West Chase Boulevard, Raleigh. Thank you to all the residents and our neighbors that came out. Christina Jones, you asked, just to clarify, why are we adding a public pathway, the sidewalk on the back? So that request came from Raleigh Transportation. It didn't come from the developer. Our preference would be not to provide a connection. However, Planning Board voted 7-0 in favor. They really wanted to see this connection too. And the reason behind it was that with the school here on the left, the residents who have kids that go to this school will theoretically use this pathway and walk to school, which is great. And I think all the entire Planning Board was very much in favor of it. But as you heard during that second neighborhood meeting that we had, especially the resident that lives here on the corner came to the Planning Board meeting and, didn't want to see that sidewalk either. I know we're caught in the middle, but that's the background to it, so you know. And then after that second neighborhood meeting, we did have a third meeting, transportation specific, at Magnolia Glen. Again, I think it was helpful to understand the impact of this specific project as it relates to transportation. And just a couple, to summarize the main points is that Creedmoor Road currently has 31,000 vehicles per day. As we just heard, signal analysis for a stoplight is not warranted at this time. Though both the developer and Magnolia Glen, we have agreed to conduct another warrant analysis, which we would expect to do to start that by the end of the year. Though based on what I just heard, I think we might get the same results. And then impact of traffic, NCDOT road requires a traffic impact analysis when you have 3,000 vehicles per day generated from a project. The only reason we did this TIA was because we're going through a rezoning. Our trip generation is less than half of that. And if you look at the worst 15 minutes in the AM and the PM, the traffic generated from our project equates to less than 1 car entering in the worst 15 minutes in the morning and 1 to 2 cars exiting in the afternoon. So, grand scheme of things, we represent 1% of the traffic on Creedmoor Road. That's all the time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll come to you in 1 sec. I have a couple questions for staff, and it goes back to Creedmoor Road and Sugar Bush. When's the last time we've done a traffic analysis around that intersection? Or the state may have done one.
So good afternoon, Monique Guyant with Transportation. With exception to this traffic impact analysis that was completed for this case, it was March 2022, which was the development on the east side, so Creedmoor Road multifamily.
Okay. I'm thinking, regardless of what happens with this rezoning case, even one of the residents stated that, it's kind of beyond the rezoning. If we can just work with the state and look at that traffic right there at Sugar Bush, where people are having to do U-turns, and maybe traffic being backed up, because I think even the state doesn't want traffic backed up through lanes. I think also looking at the line of sight, Creedmoor is hilly. I mean, I go to a church in that direction. I actually travel this road, this part all the time to attend my church. So I understand how hilly it is and things of that nature. So if we could just look at that, see where we are, I think that'll help with a lot of data, long-term planning, and maybe we can get the state to find some money and make some improvements. Especially around Sugar Bush, where people will be turning around and doing U-turns at. Councilor Harris.
Yeah, I was just curious, Michael, or for anyone on your team, about other traffic calming measures that have been considered, beyond traffic signals, roundabouts, or other methods to slow traffic down. Or is that desirable, or has it been explored?
I'll rely on Mr. Niffenegger here a little bit for this, but given that it's a state road, I doubt that we've looked at it. It is something that we could take a look at, but I'm frankly struggling to think of something that would be permissible. So, but
very good question. Certain roads, like Creedmoor, for example, you heard 31,000 vehicles a day. That's maybe half of what Capitol Boulevard carries. Sections of Capitol Boulevard, Falls of the News, Six Forks, portions of Rock Quarry. These roads carry large amount of traffic. They all also fall in the state system. The state would not, they don't have any traffic calming, nor would they want to calm traffic on roads that were designed to move vehicles, a large amount of vehicles. Our concern from a city standpoint is trying to work with the state and get ahead of things so that a crash pattern doesn't develop, that we can catch it before it does. And the landscape with the state has changed, and they've been very good to work with in terms of when a signal is getting really close to being warranted. In the past, they strictly held to the warrants. They would allow a developer to install it. In this case, one wasn't just close to being warranted. But going back to the traffic calming, on thoroughfares like this, the state wouldn't allow any sort of traffic calming.
And what about a roundabout instead of a traffic signal? I mean, it is a calming measure, but it's also, serving a similar purpose.
All these right-of-way control devices all can solve a problem, but they can create problems. A roundabout or a traffic circle on a road that carries that much volume would probably be a 3-lane one, and we don't have one in Raleigh, and we didn't have the best of luck with the 2-lane one on Pullen and Hillsborough Street. So again, that would be a tool that I don't think would necessarily be something the state would necessarily lean towards.
All right, thank you.
Real quick. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I was just noticing in the our agenda material that the site has a higher than the city average walk score. I can't tell from Google Earth. Is there a sidewalk from the site all the way up to the retail center areas? Some folks are shaking their head. Yes. There is. It's tough because we've got areas that are walkable to retail and we have sidewalks, but we have this sort of auto dependency in the city where folks are just continuously getting in their cars. And, I don't think expanding roads or doing more to get people around in their cars is the way we're going to reduce traffic. We have to get to a multimodal shift. And we do have a site where I guess arguably you could walk up to the Harris Teeter that I'm seeing on Google Maps, and I guess there's a Hardee's up there. I don't know what else. And so, adding more residential units in a walkable manner, that is typically a good thing. But then how do you guarantee that folks aren't going to rely on their cars for everything? And I think that's kind of the rub, because in theory it's nice, but if that's not, how folks are getting around, then it's in practice not really helping. And so I think that's like a perpetual conversation we have about how can we, get one fewer car on the road by helping folks get to where they need without it. And then on the pedestrian path, I will just remind the council that we did authorize staff as part of our climate action goals to create a policy that looks at when a street connection is not required, at least making the pedestrian connection required. And so I do think having pedestrian access from this site to the elementary school or elsewhere would be really important. So I do want to say I think I am in support of that. But I don't know how we address the traffic concerns on a DOT street. It's a problem we continuously run up against, and it is absolutely frustrating.
Thank you.
I just want to also highlight, as we talk about walkable and wanting to get cars, not car dependent, that this is not on a BRT line. We don't have buses, and I'd love to, if you can help me understand what the bus system looks like up here. It's not strong. Anywhere in District E, especially north of Crabtree. So in theory, like you said, yeah, it sounds good, but in order to get people out of their cars, we don't have the infrastructure to do that, to let's say, okay, here, take a bus instead, and take one that's consistent and can get you to where you need to go. Over on Glenwood, we have the 70X, and that really is just going really quickly. It's not taking people to their doctor's appointments, to schools and things like that. And I don't know 100% what the bus system looks like on Creedmoor. But when we're saying we want a more walkable community, we do have these sidewalks, and that's great. If we don't have that bus infrastructure, and it's not even planned in any of our future bus plans, it's hard to use that argument in this case, in my opinion.
There's actually the 36.
How often is it?
36 looks like it runs every, 30 minutes? Or hour? Is it every hour? It's hourly. Okay, so it's hourly, but there's Route 36 that goes up and down Creedmoor.
Right, and it's not to say that there's nothing. Like I said something that's going to get you where you need to go, and you have an hourly bus route when you're putting that many people. I don't know how that equates more walkability in this area.
Well, we can work on that. So, get more buses, more drivers. I'm sure David would love to see that. But are there any more questions on this topic? Again, we're receiving information. We'll take the information. We'll have it for the public hearing. Are there any, we can't make any recommendations, but are there any items? I mentioned the ones I have about the Sugar Bush, but are there anything that any council members want staff to look at on this item?
I think what we just said with the bus infrastructure, I'd like to see what that looks like in District E, how we can enhance that to be something. I know it's not going to be BRT, but we're the only district in the city that's not slated for any bus improvements in that level of that regard. So I would like to see how we can enhance the buses that we already have and make it so that we can make this area and Glenwood Avenue a little bit more walkable if we're not included in BRT.
Michael.
Mayor Pro Tem, we'll take a look at that. And just for clarity, there were some bus improvements that were planned. If we get some drivers, we'll be happy to put that in place. But there were some service frequency increases that we were going to have that we've just not been able to do during the driver shortage.
Okay. With that said, thank you. We will now move to our second item. Thank you all for coming. Six Forks Road improvements. How many people are here to speak? I know at least two I see, but how many people are here to speak on Six Forks Road? I see 3.5. Okay. Okay. Well, two halves make a whole, so I see 4. All right. So again, staff is going to give a presentation. Part of this we have seen before. But staff is going to present. Again, we're going to take the information. I know there are meetings. There was a meeting last night. Staff met at, I think Councilwoman Black had a community meeting in which staff was present and talked about Six Forks Road as well. So we will be receiving all of this as information to pass on as staff is collecting. And there is a survey online for people to provide feedback as well.
Give me 1 second. Mayor Pro Tem, trying to find the presentation. I found it. Yep. Yeah, we're good. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for your patience as I was pulling that up. It's a pleasure to see you all again. Kenneth Ritchie with Transportation here to provide an update on the Six Forks Road Improvement Project. As you will recall, we did go through this presentation last Tuesday at the council meeting, and as Mayor Pro Tem alluded to, we have had some outreach this week as it relates to future movement on this project. Just a little bit, we'll run through the agenda quickly, just for everybody's reference. We'll go through some background, look at project status, discuss some options, and look at next steps. So looking at the corridor study, the driving purpose from this corridor study that has continued to guide it is to create an implementable vision and master plan for how Six Forks Road between Lynn Road and 440 should transform in the coming years to become a more safe, multimodal, and attractive so as to improve livability and to create an identifiable image for this important part of Midtown. Looking at the corridor study schedule, as has been discussed widely, this started in 2012 with a visioning exercise. A public design charrette in 2014 really kind of kicked off the formal study. Tremendous engagement throughout the process. The first time that council saw the draft presentation for this was in February of 2016, and at that point, council chose to direct that to work session. As part of those ongoing conversations, there was further engagement in the spring and summer of 2017. There were two options, I think, at that point that were being discussed, a 6-lane option and a 4-lane option. Coming out of that, it was presented to Planning Commission in April of 2018, and then in June of 2018, council adopted the Six Forks Road Corridor Plan. As part of that corridor study, as it relates to the transportation element, the recommendations from that did identify a 6-lane median divided section with separated bicycle and pedestrian facilities for this as the base kind of street section for this corridor. And that has been the guidance that has really kind of taken us through with the implementation of the phase 1 plan from that corridor study, which is the Rowan to I-440. There were 2 other phases of that corridor plan that would take from Rowan to the interchange, and then proposed improvements to the interchange were the 3rd phase. Looking at the current scope that came out of that corridor study, this does show the 6-lane divided. During the course of conversations, as came out of the corridor study, and we have had those discussions with DOT, we are looking at 10-foot wide through lanes. With any turn lanes that we've got as we get towards the intersections, those will be a little bit wider, but certainly all of our through lanes will be 10 feet. We are looking at an 18.5-foot grass median. That 18.5 feet came from needing the roughly 11 feet for the turn lanes, and then providing ourselves the opportunity at those intersections to provide a 6-foot wide median. That's typically going to be our minimum to create a pedestrian refuge to promote some pedestrian confidence as they're moving across the corridor. And then, as you can see, we've got 5-foot bike lane, a 6-foot sidewalk in what we call those separated facilities along the shoulder. And today, that current scope is Rowan to Lynn. But certainly, as we have discussed previously, we have run into some funding issues as it relates to that total corridor. So looking at the project schedule as it relates to this phase 1 implementation, and I will step back kind of pre-October 2020, the design contract was approved by council, I believe, in the spring of 2020, and using some of that consultant time, we're able to put together some renderings that facilitated our early pre-design kind of public engagement with the community as it related to moving this effort forward. A number of touch points with the District A Town Hall that led into a preliminary design public engagement in the fall of 2021. At this point, we had started to identify some preliminary easement impacts, and we're starting to present those to the public. A couple of other touch points throughout this process with the Midtown CAC and certainly other opportunities for engagement. That 65% plan submittal, that really kind of was the preempt before we brought the design to council in July of 2022. The bullet with the additional CIP funding, we had started to identify that we were seeing a funding gap on this project, and we're working with the council through the CIP process to try and close the gap that had been identified. That 2020 was an informational update on the design, and also at that time, council authorized the corridor for condemnation, which gave staff the ability no earlier than a date that we had worked to set there, at which point we could use the power of eminent domain if necessary. One of the challenges that ran into with regards to that time frame was with the gap, we were also looking at adding federal funding to the project. And when we add federal funding, there's a number of other steps that we have to take from a federal compliance standpoint as it relates to not only our design elements, there's additional environmental assessments that have to be done as part of that process, but certainly a number of other steps with the real estate process that we have to go through that include review and approvals by NCDOT, as they are kind of the facilitator and overseer of that funding from the Federal Highway Administration. So in February of 23, the project was selected for LAP funding through the federal fiscal year 24 cycle. Then we're at today. I will speak a little bit to that LAP funding based off conversations we've had with Campo. Given the challenges we've got and given that we're potentially looking at rescoping the project, that initial award likely is going to be a challenge for us to be able to maintain because of the fact that they would look at us essentially having to decrease the value of that award somewhat proportional to how we would rescope the project. And so the benefit of that grant, given the other oversight, likely would see there would be decreased benefit that we would see from that value. And certainly we'll talk to the potential for LAP as it relates to some of the options here in just a minute. So looking at the current funding status for the project, the estimated cost is $119 million. Just as a reminder, the original budget that we had between the 2013 bond and the 2017 bond was about $31.3 million. That current budget of 46.1 does factor in the additional monies that have been allocated to the project through previous CIPs, so we've got a funding gap of roughly $73 million. So looking at potential options, we could cancel or restart the project. Our cost at that point would be really any design effort that's been expended to date. We could look at maintaining the 6-lane separated facilities, which came out of the corridor study, to Millbrook. That has a cost of about $66.2 million. We do still have a gap with that option as it relates to the existing budget. With that option, we likely would look at resubmitting this project into the next cycle for the locally administered projects program through Campo to try and essentially be able to take that full award amount to be able to put towards this scope. But it would have to recompete within the region. That would likely take that gap down to about $10 million. So there still would be an identification of additional funding that would have to be discussed to fund that option. The next option would be taking that same 6-lane section, but taking it to North Glen. This has a cost of about $35.6. This does fall within our existing budget, so we would not need any additional supplemental funding, be it through a federal grant program or even additional allocation to deliver that. And then the last two options would look at not changing the footprint of the road, but would look at our multimodal facilities behind the curb. So one option would be looking at separated facilities. This would be along the entire corridor from Rowan to Lynn. That's got a cost of $49.4 million, which does still leave a gap of about $3.3 million. And then the other option would be looking at about a 12-foot multi-use path from that same corridor from Rowan to Lynn. That's got a cost of about 44.4 million, or 44 million, and we do have that covered within the current budget. So I'll kind of walk through, and then these are just walking through the options in a little bit more detail with some considerations. So with the cancel or restart, the cost will be $3 million. With this, we could reallocate that funding to deferred or to other projects. And with a restart, we could re-engage with the community and kind of start from square one in terms of really kind of looking at the project and the vision for it. And given the information that we have gleaned from the time and getting to here, likely we'd have to look at some sort of phased implementation because it's certainly $120 million. And as we would consider another bond, I could see that cost potentially rising more, would put a significant burden on one particular bond package. So looking at the 6-lane section from Rowan to Millbrook, that cost is about $66.2 million. That cost there does not factor in the $3 million that we already have encumbered with our design consultant. The estimated completion is about 48 months. A lot of that is factored into the compliance efforts that we've got to do to be able to get to the point of being able to break ground, to get the construction authorization with that federal funding. As I mentioned previously, it would require resubmission through the LAP program for their federal fiscal year 25 cycle. This would allow acquisition to progress, but we would have federal requirements, so it would not be able to progress quite as fast as it would be without federal funding. There would be modest redesign, and that really would be how we transition north of Millbrook back into the existing footprint of the road. This is the 6-lane section into North Glen. That cost is about $35.6 million. Estimated completion is about 32 months. This is within current budget. This would allow staff to go ahead and move ahead with the real estate acquisition. Both of these options do cover the total take properties so there's 6 properties that we know impact structures that are full total takes. There may be potentially 2 others that with proximity damages could be total takes, but this would address both of these options. They do include those, so that would not delay any of that consideration. I know there's a number of property owners that have been in limbo with this project as it relates to this particular fact. This again would be modest redesign, and that would be that transition north of the North Glen Cranbrook intersection back into the existing street footprint. So looking at the next 2 options, again, these do not change the kind of curb to curb line. These really look at the outside from the shoulder standpoint. So this is the separated bike and pedestrian facilities from Rowan to Lynn. $49.4 million, estimated completion be 48 months. There would be a significant amount of redesign that we'd have to do with this option. Again, this is not within current budget. We do have a gap of about $3.3 million. There would be no changes to the road, but would not address any capacity or congestion issues along the corridor. And then the multi-use path option from Rowan to Lynn, this cost is about $44 million. Estimated completion about 48 months, just like the separated facilities. Significant redesign on its own. This is within the current budget. Again, doesn't change the road, but also does not address any of your capacity or congestion concerns in here. With these options, I know with some of the public engagement we've been doing, certainly we've been hearing questions about some hybrid of some of these options, and certainly that could be a consideration. And certainly we can speak to those if anybody has any questions as it relates to some of those. Because I know one that has come up is the multi-use path with regards to the 6-lane widened section, and certainly we can speak to that. So looking at next steps, we did present to you last Tuesday. We are in the midst of a public engagement kind of period. We do have an online portal. We did go to the District A Town Hall last night. We're here tonight. We're looking at some other engagement over the course of the next couple of weeks. Just to provide ourselves the flexibility, we are anticipating submitting this project into the LAP process. That does not commit us to any funding. It would ultimately just put us in position that if it does score well enough and we did want to move forward with that option, that we would have that option to accept that funding to help facilitate that. And then our plan right now is to come back to your November 21st meeting with feedback from the public engagement to discuss with council and see what direction council would like us to take in terms of moving this project forward. And so certainly I'm here, and we've got staff from engineering services here too to answer any questions you may have. And I'll bring those options up just so that we've got those for discussion.
Cool. Thank you for that presentation. I'm just going to go ahead and open it up to the public. 3 minutes per person. Please feel free to come on down and provide your thoughts and inputs.
And I'll be much less than 3 minutes. I'm Alan Oakley. I live on 6 Forts in North Glen. Oh, I'm sorry. I talk loud enough. All right, start back. No, you don't have to start back in 3 minutes. Anyway, I'm one of the total Tates of the 6 to 8 houses. 2 real quick points. I read the minutes or some of the talk from the BPAC committee. I keep hearing about destinations on 6 Forts. This Rowan to Millbrook is 1.03 miles. Take out the churches, there's 6 churches, because the churches are roughly 1 day a week, so that's not a lot of activity. I want somebody to tell me where the destinations are between Rowan and Millbrook, besides offices. It's not one. So, you know, it's great to walk. Real quick, another point, I wondered if the city had ever done a study on why people walk and what people walk to. Federal government has done quite a few. You know what the number one reason people walk is? Their dog. It's not to shop, it's not to work, it's not to go eat. In fact, if you can, in this study of over 43,000 people, if you combine people walking to shop, eat, and work, it was less than 1/3 of the total walking trips of over 110,000. People walking to work was the least. People will walk an average of 1/4 mile to a transit station and 1/2 mile to a park. So it's great to talk about destinations and walking. My wife and I walk to North Hills. It's quicker sometimes to walk to North Hills than to drive, find a parking spot. I wish the sidewalk was there in front of Carroll Middle School. It would be a little bit easier than to walk through red clay mud, but I think a lot of the people talking about walkability and destinations, it's an emotional plea and not a data-driven plea. So that's all I wanted to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Whomever's next. I don't have a list, so I can't call your names.
Hi, I'm Robert Ligon. I live at 8,000 Shillingstone Place, Raleigh, North Carolina, about 200 yards from Lead Mine Elementary School. So I drive the length, pretty much, of Lead Mine Road. Or, excuse me, 6 Forks Road. I keep hitting the 2 north-south transit corridors around my house. If you look at a map of Raleigh, there's 4 north-south transit corridors in the north half of Raleigh. Capitol Boulevard, Wake Forest Road, Falls of the Noose, 6 Forks, and Creedmoor. Those are the only 4 ways to get north-south in this city, okay? And you had a previous discussion before I got here about Creedmoor. It's not perfect either, okay? But we've got a city, a road, that is carrying somewhere on the order of 50 to 55,000 cars a day. It's not wide enough for that many cars to go down between Millbrook and Rowan. The rest of that road flows fairly freely, but you've got a major choke point that's what, 1.9 miles long? And that really needs to be fixed. It really needs to be fixed for a long time. Dates that have come up today. This project started in 2012. It's 2013. 11 years. We don't even have a finalized design for what the road should be. The conceptualized one doesn't work. If you're going to put 1.9 miles of a road with 3 10-lane sides travels on both sides, sorry, I measured my garage doors before I came here. They're 10 lanes wide. That gives me about 4 inches on each side to get my car inside. That's not a good situation. Many box trucks today are more than 10 lanes wide, 10 feet wide. And there's lots of box trucks running up and down Six Forks Road. Work on modifying the design. Do it from Rowan to Millbrook and worry about the rest later. But do 6 lanes, modified design. And it's going to cost $49 million to put bike paths from Rowan to Lynn Road. That's not a wise expenditure of money.
I'm just looking to see if there's anybody else here. I thought we were going to have a discussion today, but I was wrong again, so I'll take my 3 minutes. Let me start by saying I think you're the 3rd council members that I've talked to over the last 10 years. I've been here before. Councilman Branch, I've been in your office before, along with Councilman Jones. So here we go again. Let's look at the options. The first one, cancel and restart the project. I have things written down I was going to say, but it really isn't worth it. You can't cancel and restart the project if you want to improve the safety of Six Forks Road. You've already heard them say that some of those lanes on Six Forks are 8 feet wide. It's the same problem we have on Wake Forest Road. The representative you had for Wake Forest Road told everybody in the audience he's scared to death to drive his Tahoe down that section of Wake Forest Road because it barely fits in the lane. So as it was just mentioned by Mr. Ligon, imagine that box truck. Imagine that landscaper's trailer on the back. It's just disaster waiting to happen. Why does the road back up? Real simple. You got the crimp points of narrow lanes. You got 2 lanes, 3 lanes, and it goes back and forth. Every time somebody opens up to a 3-lane, right after that they hit 2 lanes again. So it just backs up traffic constantly. Where's the worst section of the roadway? In front of North Hills Mall. Everybody knows that. There have been projections for road improvements for that area for as far back as I can remember. Now, let's talk about the 10 years of community engagement with this project still on the table. Let's talk about the 6 lanes and the separated facilities, Rowan to Millbrook. No question, good expenditure of money because it's the worst, most dangerous section of roadway out there, except for in front of North Hills Mall. Everybody knows Honey Ham. Try to get the Honey Ham November, December with the traffic backed up in front of it. We used to have a problem with Effie Green, but they fixed the roadway in front of Effie Green so it now has a major thoroughfare in front of it. It's easy to get in and out of, and a traffic light. Carroll Middle School. People used to line up along both roads just to try to get into and out of Carroll Middle School. Will this help them? I don't know. It's going to take a little bit more than just the improvements to Six Forks. Same thing with St. Timothy's on the other side. People line up on the road. Why does the traffic back up so badly around North Hills? Because you got Lassiter Mill, which was just recently cut down from the 1 lane for a bike lane to cut down on the number of lanes on that road. And the same thing is going to happen probably when they finish up whatever they're doing with North Hills. So I'm telling you right now, you got to put the money into the road at some point. Why not do it completely in one shot and get it done? 6 lanes with separated facilities, Rowan to North Glen. Let me remind you quickly that the bike lanes and pedestrian piece was not in the initial comprehensive plan recommendation. The roadway was. Thank you.
Larry, just a quick question for you. So basically, Rowan and Millbrook is the part that you're saying the most dangerous, and the part that to address. Okay.
You got to widen the road. You can't fix it without widening the road.
Got you. Okay.
I'm Tara Robbins with the Midtown Raleigh Alliance. Been here many times talking about the Six Forks Corridor Plan, study, funding, and urging this and previous councils to act. Looking at what's up here, first I want to make a statement because I too like Larry, I thought this was going to be a conversation. I thought we were going to have discussion. I've got questions written down,
Okay.
and I've got 3 minutes. So, anyway, I've been involved with this project since 2013. I don't know if anyone else in here has been involved with the project yet. Okay. So, seen it go through many iterations. The original plan was tremendous. Okay, it checked every box. We had over 50 public and stakeholder meetings. There was neighborhood transitions, there's pedestrian refuges, there's stormwater remediation in the medians. There's improved facilities for pedestrian and cyclists. But you know, the community has done their job. Over the past 10 years, they've come forward. They've met and surveyed and chatted and had these conversations, and they have done their job. And it's now, it's time for the city to do their job, okay? And we have a plan that is awesome. And now, because of inaction over the past several years, it's very expensive. We can't cancel and restart the project. And as good as pedestrian and bicycle facility addition would be in the corridor, 50,000 people don't ride their bike and walk to work, but people drive to work on that corridor. And it is a major north-south thoroughfare into the city, not just serving here, but people from up in Creedmoor, people, you know, heading into downtown. So this has been neglected for a long time, and these improvements need to be made. And I'm here to reiterate the process we went through, the product, an award-winning plan. Stan Tech and Design Workshop put together a fantastic plan. And if you haven't gone back and looked through it, and it's a heavy read, but it addresses so many things in the corridor. It's a complete streets plan. So my message to you as someone who has been through the process since the beginning is look at the plan. There's no option that doesn't include road widening that meets the initial goals of the Six Forks Corridor Plan. So those are my comments, and I do have a question.
Go ahead. What are your questions? You can stop the clock. What are your questions?
My first question is, I served on the steering committee in 2017 to pass the transportation bond. The single largest item on that bond, $29 million, was to fund phase one of this corridor plan, 29 point something million dollars. Voters approved that. As I understand it, in 2018, early in 2018, those bonds would have been sold. So my question is, you know, taking COVID out of the equation, because to be honest, transportation projects continued to move even though COVID was happening and there were lockdowns. They just wasn't happening here. So why did it take so long for us to start right-of-way acquisition? I know I spoke with several counselors sitting up here now about right-of-way acquisition 3 years ago. And so I just want to know when and how those decisions were made that we didn't do what we knew were going to be the most expensive part of this. You know, property owners were not reached out to. So I guess I would like to know that for myself. And
Can you?
Last July by council.
Right, July 22 is when it was approved by council.
When it was first approved to start the process of land acquisition.
Correct.
okay, so why did it take up until 2022 for this to happen when we've known the impacted properties for a long time? And I don't mean to place blame. I'm just.
You want to understand the process.
Time equals money, and
Right.
we are seeing how time is equaling money right
Can,
here.
can someone speak to?
I'll do my best. So Mr. Ritchie explained how we had gone through, when money's become available, we had gone through the process to do the consultant selection process. So that takes a little bit of time. Then we have to begin surveys. We do those surveys. And then when we don't begin those conversations about what are the properties and how they're affected until we've gotten a significant amount of work done in terms of a design. We do that because there are opportunities to sometimes shift particular elements of a plan and to mitigate some of those impacts. There are sometimes when those are unavoidable. There's a little bit of a back and forth that goes on with utilities about how we make those adjustments for utilities. But all of that takes some amount of time. So from 2020 to 2022, until we had a 65% plan and could present that to council, and then have that authorization to begin the property acquisition, that's where it gets into that. Additionally, I'll just say the work, sometimes when we found that we were going to need additional funds and we went to LAP program, that program requires us to go through a federal process. Unfortunately, with federal money, there are federal rules and there's extra time involved in that. So while it seems like it was a slow process, staff was working through that, and that's kind of how we got to where we were today.
Yeah, a question?
Can I also ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Because I have asked the project planner, and I didn't, well.
Can you come to the mic, please?
You saw that one of the points on there was a Midtown meeting about the Six Forks plan. Well, I think we had 3 altogether that I can remember. That was probably the last one, where we actually had rolled out maps to look at. Had reached that point, so we had things to discuss. So I asked the current project manager for this project, is there any road currently within Raleigh that has this type of plan? In other words, is there another complete street project within Raleigh where you see expanded lanes for cars, you see a bike path, you see a pedestrian path? I don't know of any, and I don't think there is another. So you are looking at a unique opportunity to improve Six Forks with the features that you want to throw in for walkability, for bikes, for whatever. But that's not really where the emphasis has to be. The emphasis is on the road work. So if you want an emphasis on the road work, and then you want the luxury features that go along with it, point to an example that has that. Is there another corridor that has that same plan? I don't think so. The 18-foot median, maybe there are areas in the city that have that. But I don't think there's any complete street project on the books, not even New Bern. New Bern, the emphasis is on the road. It's not on the rights of acquisition. I'm sure there is some. It's not on the paths that go along the route that people can walk on. But this one seems to have it all. Tara hit it on the head. It's a perfect plan, well-written document, project plan. I've pointed people to it. Unfortunately, it is a heavy read, but the documents are out there. So show me a comparison to another project that you're already either agreed to spend money on or going to spend money on that compares to Six Forks.
So I can, since you mentioned New Bern, I can say there are some sidewalks and pedestrian improvements that are made. We actually combined 2 projects into one for that part of New Bern Avenue from Raleigh Boulevard north, where it's not the same sidewalk length. But I think if I remember from some conversations we had here at the table, one of the concerns people had was bicycles and people walking on the same path, and they wanted it separated. So that came up, I think, in the conversation that we had. So I think that's where we got, how we got there, if I'm correct. And I see you're nodding in agreement. So Michael, is there anything else you think to share? Are there any other questions, anything else that we can try to address that you all have?
Or can I ask one?
Yes, sir.
Since this has taken almost 12 years, what's the future process as far as committee, council, back to committee, public hearing?
So,
could you just, I mean, I'm not holding you to it, but just, I think a lot of us would like to have a good idea of hopefully a penciled in timeline.
right. I can speak to what's presented, that this comes back to council on November 21st. And on November 21st, with the information we received from all the public comment, at that time, I think staff, correct me if I'm wrong, may have a recommendation based on the public input.
We'll share with you what the public input has been, where you know, what's been the outcomes of some of our meetings, what the poll, our online survey has to say. We'll share all of that with you at that time.
And then at that time, council will make some type of decision on where we go from there. But from what I hear from everyone is you want a decision made. And I shared that with staff earlier in a meeting I had with them. Regardless of what it is, we want a decision made so that people can move forward and don't feel tied to the unknown.
The property,
Correct.
we just want that.
Exactly. And that's fair. That's fair. Yes.
I just want to say a couple things. I wasn't on the city council when this process started, but I will say that anytime we have a major improvement project, it will always cost more tomorrow than it will cost today, and it'll cost more next year than it'll cost this year. And so sometimes I see these plans being made, these promises being made, and we don't act on them with urgency. And then when it comes time to act, we start having conversations about, well, we can't afford to do it anymore. We have to change it. And that's really frustrating. And it's frustrating for me as a resident who wants to use the improvements, and it's frustrating for me as a council member sitting here. We cannot go back and say, well, what happened wrong with this project and change it. We're stuck where we're at now. But what I do want to see is in the future, I don't know how we cost estimate or budget 46 million and then the project comes in 120. Like, we have to be more conservative with our cost estimations and then have a plan to put into place. For it to overrun $73 million over the course of this planning process, it's almost indefensible, and I don't know how we fix that other than we have to figure out how we can do it better on the next one. For this project itself, I have been contacted by folks that are now saying, don't widen the roads, don't take down the trees, don't take people's properties. It seems to me, though, my personal opinion aside, that there was a lot of engagement on this project. The community really wants the additional travel lanes to help with the congestion issues. As far as the separated facilities go, I'm the biggest probably bike ped advocate. I get criticized for it all the time or applauded for it all the time, depending who you ask. But the New Bern Avenue corridor is going to have a multi-use path, not separated facilities, as part of the improvements for BRT. I would think that for this improvement, if we had to adjust something, combining the separated facilities and the sidewalk into one multi-use path, I still think accomplishes our goals, and I think it mirrors what we're doing along other major transit corridors. I would be interested to see what the cost would be for a 6-lane separated facility from Rowan to Millbrook the 6 lanes from Rowan to Millbrook with the multi-use path rather than the separated facilities. I'd be curious to see what that cost would be. I think there was a conversation that they may look at that. But I think as a council, we've got two options here. Is we either run another transportation bond and fully fund this original plan, which is going to delay it even further because that takes a while, or we find a way to rescope it. And if there's a way we could rescope it, but then even in the future go back and add in some of the things that we're cutting out. But we have to get started, because if we don't get started now, I know if I'm sitting here again next year, we're going to have a conversation about how it's a bigger deficit. And then the folks like the gentleman here are going to have no certainty on their property, and everyone along the corridor is going to be increasingly frustrated. So we need to do something, and I think the community deserves the street improvements, and I think we should look at a multi-use path rather than the separated facilities. And I know that's going to make some people mad, but it is not inconsistent with what we're doing along other major routes.
Okay.
So I think just to speak to that a little bit, Councilmember Melton, because this has been a question that's come up before, and we've had this discussion with some of the community. Certainly as it relates to New Bern, we're doing multi-use path on one side, sidewalk on the other. A lot of that was driven because that did predate TC 321, which kind of established the separated facilities. My recollection is Western and Southern, their base design does look at separated facilities along those. As it relates to this corridor in particular, when you look at, so we've talked about a 12-foot multi-use path, which technically would be wider than taking these two facilities and combining them together, even if it's 11 feet, 10 feet. The challenge that we run into as it relates to the impacts of that is today our overhead utilities, the Duke lines, are going to be running between the two facilities. We then have to move those back. So really those poles are going to be set at the right-of-way line. And then you look at the easement that Duke is going to require us to have, because they're typically going to want 15 feet on either side, is what their typical easement is going to be 30 feet for distribution. Well, half of that would be in the right-of-way. The other half they're going to want on the backside. So that's going to be a further encumbrance that we'll have to deal with as it relates to easement acquisition on those individual properties, which in the situation of the separated facilities, a lot of that 15 feet is actually going to be in the right of way because of the nature of where it's at. They just need to have that space to be able to access. And they do have some pretty tight regulations in terms of even when they get easements that aren't right of way, in terms of how that space can be used by property owners. And so I think typically when we go acquire either electric utility easement or private utility easement, I believe that's at 100% cost in terms of the value of the property. So just because of the nature of how restrictive Duke is with those easement rights. So that's kind of why with these options, we had looked at the multi-use path before. There wasn't really a tremendous savings, and in some regards, we could see a potential larger impact from the amount of the easement that we would actually need in that scenario.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Looks like we're having a discussion.
Can you come to the mic, please?
Let me first say that I'm not a math major, but
Can you come to the mic? So people online can hear the discussion.
I love it. I love transparency. I love recordings. I love visibility. It's great. I wish we had it for the bike committee meeting that they had. No transparency, no idea what happened there. Town hall, we had no transparency, no recording. So you guys have to go by the minutes of what happened. We have that today. I'm not a math major, but if you look at all of the diagram that's up in front of you now and try to measure that up and come to 125 feet, you won't get there. So I've got to believe that the utility spacing that's required for the roadway is built in. The lines may not be there, but it's built in, because when you see the lamppost back behind the second walkway, it's already accounted for. The other thing I was going to say, and everybody's got to remember, because I'm going to be back up here probably within the next couple of months, there's already a 20-story project coming about shortly that's going to be right below the 440 interchange. So that section of highway that we're not touching today because we don't have money to address it, people are going to come to you then and say, nice, 20 stories, a lot of people, a lot of cars, how are we going to get on the highway? And there's no answer for that. So what you have in front of you today is a way to at least catch up with development. St. Albans, pretty soon you won't get down St. Albans with everything that's coming on St. Albans, and that's the only connecting point besides the Beltline to go from Wake Forest to Six Forks. I've said this before. So what's in front of you today is whether you want to make your investment to improve Six Forks so people can move freely up and down the road in a better manner, or put it off again. Another bond issue will put it off again. You're asking to perhaps raise money with another bond, where people are going to say to you, well, we've done this twice before. Why isn't the road finished? And it's a logical question. Campo, you're going to ask them for more money. They're going to say, we have money we wanted to give you. Where did it go? What did you do with it? So the point is, I think you need to act. You need to catch up with development. And that was the same discussion with the last council. Does development keep pace with road infrastructure? And the answer is no. So as Jonathan just said, you're going to have that same discussion with the next council all over again. Please take this into consideration. It's a great plan. Tara said everything was perfect, and it is. Just start. Don't care where, just start. If we have to compromise with only Rowan to Millbrook, it's a good start. It's not the end. There are other traffic improvements that need to be made, but start.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions that can be made at the mic?
Yeah, just one comment about the Millbrook interchange. This is going back to like 2003, I think, but there was a transportation bond that looked at fixing the Millbrook interchange. I think it's operating at like a level F or something as far as performance goes. And at that time, it's either 2001 or 2003, there was money put aside, a decent amount of money approved in a transportation bond to fix the Millbrook interchange. They looked at it, did some planning, transportation looked at it, and said, you know what, we're going to hold off because we'd rather look at it fixing that in a more holistic approach, looking at the whole corridor. So the improvements to Millbrook have been the most egregious, I think, as far as kicking the can down the road. And so whatever we do, moving forward, let's just please prioritize looking at that Millbrook interchange and really fixing it once and for all.
Okay.
And that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Cool. Thank you. Just so everyone knows, the notes and minutes that are being taken will be passed on to staff to be part of that whole package that comes back to the full council on the 21st. We're going to report this item and the previous item out, hopefully once I get a motion to report them out with no action taken today, because we're still waiting on some more information, and we still have to have the public hearing for your rezoning case. So
moved.
So it's been moved and properly second to report both of these out. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you all for coming out, and thank you for the conversation.